Welcome back to, I think this will probably be the final installment of the Great Guitar Build-Off series. Didn't really have a great plan or format for all these videos. The last video should have been all the final sanding and fretwork and prep like that. And this kind of will go over my finishing process and final assembly. And maybe we'll do another video with some of the actual playing. For this guitar, I'm going to be using Solarez I Can't Believe It's Not Lacquer. And so I've got two here. I got their grain sealer and their brush-on formula of the lacquer. I do not have a spray facility or the desire to really add that to my workshop at the time, just due to space. This product cures rock hard in about 60 seconds in direct sunlight. One of the things I hope to do is build a small UV chamber so that we can actually cure finishes in the winter or at night when I'm available to do some of this finishing. So what we're going to do is it's relatively cool. The product should be cold when you're using it. We like to brush it on and then let it, once it's on, let it kind of flow out and let it set. So one of the things I'll do as I'm prepping my space is I'll turn on my air cleaner and clean up from all the dust from the sanding process. Once I'm clean, I use my primary workbench for prep, brushing it on. I'll have a workbench set up outside to help cure that, so I can bring the pieces out one at a time and clamp them to the mobile workbenches. And then I still have my table saw set up with the downdraft table for sanding in between coats. Talk about it, I'm not sure how I'm going to film all this to get it, but the grain sealer, you kind of squeegee on and you squeegee off as much as possible and then cure it. And then I'm going to do that about 4 to 5 times, maybe 4 times on the whole body, and then maybe 1 or 2 more additional coats on the roundovers and the edges, because those are where we tend to burn through. I want more thickness there. So we're going to grain fill all that end grain as much as we possibly can. And I noticed that zebra wood on top is has huge grain and pores in it. So that's going to probably be a challenge. I may have to evaluate and see where we're at with that. And then when it comes to the lacquer, some guys like Chris at Highland Guitars wipes it on with a makeup applicator. I've tried that. The gentleman at the company recommends brushing on a really thick coat and letting that flow out and cure it. I've tried that. On both, I've burned through on the edges. So that might be down to my technique. But other than that, this product sands up really nice and buffs out. And enough with the talk. We'll get on to it. So before we begin with the finishing, just going to play through some footage of where we came from. So here I'm just going back to the original video, looking at some of the wood choices and what we did to arrive here. I had already re-sawn and plate jointed that top and found that black limba body that I had seen some imperfections in that was a good piece of lumber to use a top for. So we're just going to go through and just kind of hit some of the big steps and the highlights here. Just spend a couple minutes just so we have the whole overview, since this is the final video. So we went from that to cutting our scarf joint, and if you're looking at the scarf joint, this is one of those areas I said I need to retool and get a better alignment set up. What I have works. It's pretty basic, but again, this is an area where I have to look for more precision and a little less stress in the glue up and the fixing of that joint. So that's one area that we're spending more time reviewing it again, but you can come up with a headstock that is the wrong angle, not steep enough of an angle, the wrong thickness, or you can even have a skew in your headstock as you make that joint. So it's just really important that I keep retooling this to try to find something that works for consistency. This is just one of those areas I want to highlight if you're looking into guitar building. In my process, I really try to complete the bulk of the neck first. So here's some footage of me going through the fret slotting. And again, cutting your own fretboards saves a lot of money, and also just really kind of get you invested in all steps of the process, how deep those slots are with the radius, and it's just a good thing there. So from there, we're going to go on and we will look into uh, the next steps. So what you're seeing here is me coming up after all the routing is done and the carving is done. I didn't show carving in this overview video because I spent a lot of time in the last one. The big thing here is I'm doing the grain sealing. I'm squeegeeing cross grain. Um, and I do think you probably wanted to use something better than a credit card. They actually make more like body filler squeegees that are a little more, they're still rigid, but a little more flexible. Maybe give a little, um, not an expert, but I feel like that would probably do a better job. You can see the body is already outside curing. So this is a grain sealer. I'm not worried about flowing it out so much. It's just filling and scraping that stuff off. And by the time I'm done coating the neck, I'm bringing the body back in to coat the back. That's how quick this stuff works. So this is about after 4 or 5 coats of the grain sealer for Solarez. You can see that these things have been sanded down, scuffed down. Normally at 400, all I had was 320 this go around. But you see, the grain is mostly filled. You can see a little bit on the edge here. There's some spots that are just a little, still a little hungry for some more finish. But I think I'm at a stage where start going on with the next actual top and final coat, which will be the regular Solarez brush on formula. I can't believe it's not lacquer. And so we're going to follow the advice from the gentleman who I spoke with at Solarez, and we're going to go with a foam brush. And this is where I cut that old audio off, and I'll just voice over it here. I went with the foam brush. He recommended a brush. So I did that experiment in this. I found that as I used the foam brush and laid it down, it went on thicker than a makeup applicator, but I still found that even after a number of coats, I still was fairly thin. I did go out and grab a like 2.5-inch brush and use that, and I found that this is a much more thick coat that you can put down and let it flow out, and I saw better results even in just how the finish flowed out. So I'm going to skip through some of the sanding. I think anyone watching a woodworking or a guitar building video knows that at this point I'm going through all the grits, 600 and 800 grits on my orbital sander, and then after that 1000 grit, and then 15, 2500, or 2000, 2500, 3000 grit, until I have a nice flat finish with no shiny low spots and no scratches. So we'll go on to buffing. So as you see, the big machine I have there is a 400 something pound cast iron buffing machine. It's a little overkill, but it's what I could find on Craigslist that I could rebuild. Using the Mizurna compound, that first is a fine compound, then the ultra fine. There's a lot of care you can get into in how you maintain these wheels. But for this video, just know that you have to learn how to hold this thing, hold the body, hold the neck, so that it's not going to come out of your hands. You have to know how to approach the wheel correctly. But one go with this, and you can see how the shine is already coming right, from 3000 grit to this, the shine just comes right out. So I like to let those cool down, give them a wipe off with a microfiber towel, and then go on to the next, the superfine compound. And yeah, there's a difference between the two, and again, just a really nice setup with the machine. If you don't have one, you can get away with other buffing machines, but anything with a 14-inch wheel seems to have been something that made this part of the job very enjoyable and seemed to increase the quality of that clear coat, that mirror finish. Before assembly, I go through and do all my fret work. Here I'm just beveling the edges with a homemade file. All I could say is when it comes to some of these specialty tools, I mean, these I made, but all the Z files and the safe edge files that you can get from StewMac are worth the money to make this an enjoyable process. One thing I learned this go around, I heard Ben Crow from Crimson talk about how you tape off your fretboard. I tried the method of using both edges of the tape as opposed to cutting, and a lot faster. Here I'll sand and polish them up to about between 600 and 1,000 after I've leveled them. I'm not going to show every step of that just for time's sake, but once I've got them leveled off and sand it down, I'll take them back over to my buffing machine where I put a smaller wheel on with a different, maybe a little more coarse of a compound on that small wheel, and I'll buff that off. Then I'll start doing shielding, electronics, get all that dialed in and ready to go. You'll also see me working on the finish here, getting all the areas where the finish builds up, where I'm going to be putting hardware. We don't want any lifting or separation, and you got the control cavity cover in by scraping the edges. And possibly this may have caused me an issue, and still out trying to figure out what I had problems later in this build. Here you see me setting up for a nut, going ahead and using again all these tools from StewMac between the fret ruler and the vise and the files and the saw. Makes this a much more enjoyable task, and the quality just comes out when you have the right tool. Then we move into making the pickup mounting plate, which is all made out of aluminum by hand, hand tapped. Just a really good way to mount your pickup and have it be adjustable without having the wood screws. Here's where my issue with the finish came in. One, it was hard to get that pickup in. Finish buildup was bad. And also, my neck was kicked slightly out of alignment. No matter how much I adjusted or tried to remove finish, I ended up seeing that something was slightly off. So you'll see that in the final rendition of this guitar, we have a different bridge on there with a slightly smaller string spacing. That's part of the craft, is figuring out how to fix problems, and that's something I had to do here. So we're going to go right into the basement for a little bit of a sound check, and then some final photos. So we finished. This new body style is sitting next to its counterpart as the bass that I made previously. So we've proven this design for a guitar. Got this running through my little Fender Princeton chorus. Strings are fresh on it, so it's probably going to roll out of tune really quick, but got nice single coil with a split coil. Back to the double, the humbucker. Looks good so far. It's I just put the strings on it, so we'll have to let this sit for a little while and then run it through a full setup. But so far, happy with even just the initial setup for playing. Well, sorry for the abrupt audio. Like most guitar builders, I'm not exactly the best guitar musician, but great build. Took quite a bit, a lot of learning along the way. A couple things had to be fixed in process, and ultimately I learned a lot, like I do on every build, and this is a new shape and a little bit new style, a few new things, so I'm grateful for the chance to do that. You can reach out and ask any questions here in the comments, or at 3 Sons Guitars on Instagram, or 3sonsguitars.com, and I have a reverb page as well if you want to look at what I have available for sale, or possibly even a custom order. So with that, thanks for watching, and good luck to everybody with their great guitar build-offs here in 2021. Peace.